everyone. This is my first face-up video, so sorry if it's a little bit clumsy. Today I'm going to be painting my Volks Lucas. He's about 15 years old, and so he's pretty yellowed. So I'm hoping to add a little bit of pink to his face to even out the yellowing. I'm starting off with his eyebrows. I usually start with the eyebrows because for me that's the hardest part, and that way if I have to start over again, it's not such a loss. I start off with pastels to just sort of get down the shape. I'm using Schminke soft pastels. The brand doesn't really matter though, that's just what's easily available to me. They sell it at my local paint shop, so just find a brand that you like that are comfortable using. I'm also using a kneaded eraser to refine the shape. You'll also see that I end up making a mistake and deciding to completely erase it and start over again. They were just a little bit uneven, and he kind of ended up having a little bit of an attitude look that I didn't want. So I quickly redid it. In between each of these layers, I am spraying with Mr. Super Clear. Then I'm going to take this mop brush and I am going to go over with some pink just to get a little bit of blush going on his cheeks to add a little bit more color to his face. I use this big round mop brush from Master's Touch. Again, it doesn't really matter what kind of brush you use. In fact, I suggest that you don't use a really expensive brush because you're going to end up going through brushes and destroying them. You'll also see me picking at the head every now and then with a pair of tweezers. I have a cat and he sheds a lot, and I tend to get cat hair all over my work. So I'm not scratching the face at all, I'm just trying to pick the hair that itself, or if it happens to get stuck under some sealant, I'll just sort of scrape the sealant off and reseal over top of it. Then for the eyebrow hairs, I'm going in with a colored pencil. I am using just the regular Prismacolor color pencils. I know most people say to use watercolor pencils, which I do use most of the time, but I find that these work fine as well. I've never had an issue with removing them, so they're not staining or anything. I think maybe they just don't quite blend as well as the watercolor pencils do. So I still suggest the watercolor pencils. Here you will see me combining a couple of different colors of pastels to paint his lips. I didn't want him to have lips that were too pink or too red. I wanted them to be slightly brown, so I added a little bit of brown pastel to some pink and some red, and I'm just laying it on with a flat brush. Now, here is where things started to go a little bit wrong. When I had cleaned up this face up, I didn't do a very good job of removing the original gloss in between the lips, and so you can see that it's starting to come off as I am laying down the pastels, and I'm having to pick it out with my tweezers. And what I ended up doing was just removing the pastel with my magic eraser, and then I finished picking out as much of that old leftover gloss as I could. In the end, I felt like I needed to completely remove what I had done to the lips, so I'm taking a toothpick and some cotton, and I'm going to take some Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and restorer, and I'm just going to remove whatever I have left on the lips. Luckily I don't have too much blushing, so it's not going to destroy the whole face up. I don't have to completely start over, but I did have to try and scrub out as much as I could. So it turned out fine in the end, thankfully. After the fiasco with the lips, I thought I would to go for the eyes first before I tackled those lips. I did get a little bit of smudge of the pastel on there. I think what happened is my kneaded eraser, I think it might be a little bit too kneaded. And so I think it's leaving a little bit of kind of a sticky film on the doll. So I think I'm going to have to switch it out for a newer piece. I've probably got too much of my the oils from my hands in it. So, but here I am shading above the lids. I like, for boys, I like to darken sort of that crease between the eyebrow and the lid near the bridge of the nose. I think that tends to make them look a little bit more masculine. And then for the girls, I'll do kind of the opposite. I will shade the outer corner of the eyes instead. Then I'm going in and with a little bit of a darker color, and I'm shading the areas where his eyelashes would be. So just sort of the lower lash line and then just in that top corner. Alright, now I'm finally ready to tackle those lips again. So once more, I'm combining a little bit of the brown pastel with the pink and the red, and I'm just going in and I'm doing a solid shade on the lips, and I'm using my mop brush to blend it all in, giving his nose a little bit of shading as well. I tend to kind of work all over. I find that it just sort of ends up looking better that way, and it helps me in my ADHD, just being all over the place. And look, more cat hairs. Yay. So now I'm going in and adding a little bit of shading to the lips. I have done this in a few different layers where I'm just adding more of that brown pink mixture, and then I'll also go in and add a little bit of red as well. In the end, this sort of didn't really make a difference because once I put the gloss on, it kind of all blended together. So all that work was kind of for nothing. Even though I've been doing face ups for years and years, I still make mistakes all the time. So you'll see me going in and erasing a lot of things. I have made so many mistakes on this face up, but in the end it turned out fine, so I'm still happy with it. Here I'm adding some eyelashes. I go in with a lighter brown first and sort of figure out the shape that I'm going with. And then later you'll see me go in with a slightly darker one, and with the darker color I stick really, really close to the waterline instead of drawing on full lashes. I also, when I'm doing the top liner, I almost always use black, and I tend to just kind of rub the pencil right along the edge, and that gives me a pretty sharp line. I'm not very good at drawing a nice steady line, so especially with paint, so I like to go in with a pencil. I find that is a really, really good technique. Then I'm just darkening the brows a little bit. His original face up had much darker brows, so I wanted to try and capture that. And just darkening up the eyes a little bit, trying to make him look a little bit more dramatic. Now I'm going in with just solid red pastel, and I'm coloring in the waterline. I will also then blend it in with my mop brush again to sort of make it less dramatic. This makes him look more alive. I've had a few face-ups where I've forgotten to add this, and then they ended up just kind of looking like dolls instead of like little people. Once I darkened up those eyes a bit, I noticed that you can't really see the blush anymore, so I went in and darkened the blush a little bit. Here is where I ended up making another mistake. I was a little bit scared to go in and color in the top waterline with black acrylic, so I tried to do it with pencil, and my pencil ended up slipping and I made a big mark on the top of his lid. So now I'm having to go back and recolor all of that. So I'm just sort of gonna go and color that in with the paint, the black acrylic paint instead. I found that this go around it was much easier to do it that way. I tend to go back and forth between them depending on how steady my hands are and how confident I'm feeling. So I guess this time black acrylic paint won out. Now I'm going in and I'm adding his moles. I took a photo of his previous face up, and so I'm referencing his photo. His original mole pattern was based off of Dylan O'Brien's mole pattern, which is kind of funny and a little bit embarrassing. But when I had first watched Teen Wolf forever ago, I kept thinking, gosh, that kid looks kind of familiar. And then finally, after a couple of years of watching the show, I was like, you know what? Dylan O'Brien kind of looks like a Volks Lucas. So when I got my Lucas, I kind of wanted to give him a very similar mole pattern. So uh, enjoy that embarrassing story. So for the moles, I will go in with a couple of different colors of colored pencil, just to give it a little bit of dimension, and I find that it makes it look a bit more realistic. Then once I have done that and given the head a final coating of Mr. Super Clear, I go in and I add a little bit of gloss. I'm using Tamiya, and I do some on his lower waterline and then some on his lips. And I recently learned that Tamiya tends to dissolve the Mr. Super Clear, and so what happened on his lips is it dissolved a little bit of the Super Clear and ended up mixing a bit with the pastels underneath, so it got a little bit smudged. So now I'm trying to decide if I want to do eyelashes. In the end, I ended up not going with eyelashes because I felt like he just looked really good without them. But I thought I would try these glib ones that I had in dark brown because they're a bit shorter. I didn't want him to have long curly lashes. But once I put these in, they still ended up looking really girly, so I removed them. In order to apply the eyelashes, I'm just using regular old Elmer's white glue, and I'm applying it with another toothpick. So I just put a little bit on his upper waterline, and I'm using those tweezers to attach them, and then I remove them because I decided I didn't like them. This is the Volks brand eye putty. This is my absolute favorite brand of eye putty. I will never go back to using anything else. This is really non-oily, and it just sticks really well, so I highly recommend it. So you just use it like normal, put the eyes in the IOL and then position them. And then there you have it. Now we're done. Except gotta pick some more cat hairs off. Yay!